Tonight, we drift into the story of water. Not just any water, but the ordinary miracle that seeps through time, tides, and tissues. It pulses through every living thing, ripples through the fabric of our past, and maybe, just maybe, trickles into our dreams. Our tale will wander from icy voids between the stars to ancient seas and stormy mythologies, from crumbling aqueducts to the humble glass on your nightstand. Now, let's be honest. My goal isn't to dazzle you wide awake. Quite the opposite. Ideally, this story will cradle your thoughts and ease you into sleep. But if you happen to linger a little longer, you'll find out why ice defies gravity, how the Romans piped their empire together, and why every sip you take is unimaginably old. So nestle in, take a warm sip, and let's begin. Long before Earth shimmered blue, before clouds waltzed through the sky or waves kissed a shore, there was silence. Space, cold, vast, and full of potential. In that frozen stillness, something miraculous began. Tiny, resilient water molecules formed in the hearts of stars. 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen, a trio forged in celestial fire. Hydrogen, the ancient wanderer, was born moments after the Big Bang, drifting through a newborn universe. It was light, it was plentiful, and it was ready. Deep within stars, it fused and transformed, and eventually gave rise to oxygen. And when those stars died, they burst into supernovas, flinging elements like party confetti across the cosmos. Somewhere in the interstellar dark, these atoms collided, gently, like dancers meeting at a masquerade. Especially in the chill of space dust, they clung together as H2O, not in pools or streams, but as frozen whispers on grains of cosmic soot. The universe's first snowflakes. These icy particles clumped, forming larger bodies, comets, asteroids, baby planets. Many scientists believe Earth's water wasn't born here at all. It arrived, hitching a ride on these frozen visitors. Picture a young Earth, molten and moody, pummeled by cosmic ice balls. This period, known as the Late Heavy Bombardment, was less a gentle sprinkle and more a galactic downpour. But through all that chaos, water came, oceans worth of it, tucked inside asteroids and frozen comet hearts. Not everyone agrees. Some think water welled up from Earth itself, breathed out by volcanoes in steamy gusts, later cooling and condensing into rivers and rain. The truth? Likely both. A planetary cocktail, part stellar snowfall, part volcanic exhale. And here's a wondrous thought. Some of those original water molecules, survivors of deep space and ancient lava, may still swirl in your tea, your soup, your bloodstream. Water is the ultimate shape-shifter, evaporating, freezing, flowing, but its essence endures. Water is strange, beautifully strange. It's the only substance on Earth to naturally exist in all 3 states: solid, liquid, gas. That's thanks to its odd little shape, a bent molecule with a tiny electric charge. This allows it to bond, cling, and connect like the world's most affectionate molecule. That stickiness gives water its superpowers. It dissolves, carries, climbs. It's why tea steeps and rivers nourish the land. It's how trees drink skyward and how paper towels work their quiet magic. But before all that, before forests, faucets, or rainfall, Earth had to settle, cool, solidify. And then the great rain came. Not drizzle, not showers, a deluge that may have lasted millions of years. Imagine a sky blanketed in storm clouds, oceans falling from above, smothering fire and filling craters. The planet wrapped in a thick, misty shroud as water claimed its new home. Those early oceans boiled and hissed, simmering over volcanic vents, reshaping stone and cradling the first whispers of life. So here we are, at the edge of dreams, tracing water's path from star to sea, from comet to kettle. It's not just a drink. It's a traveler, a memory, a miracle. And tonight, as you listen or drift gently away, know that the water inside you is ancient, patient, and still very much alive. There's a kind of poetry to all this. Water formed in the coldest corners of space arrives on a fiery young planet, survives chaos and collision, and eventually becomes the calm, reflective substance we know. It began as something cosmic and unfamiliar, and slowly, patiently, it became the cradle of life. Even today, we're still uncovering new clues about the origins of Earth's water. Space missions have analyzed comets and asteroids to measure their isotopic signatures, comparing them with the water we find in Earth's oceans. Some comets seem like a match, others don't. It's a celestial mystery that may never be solved completely, but that's part of its charm. After all, the idea that your cup of tea is made of molecules older than the Earth itself is already quite the bedtime thought. So, here we're on a blue planet floating in space, all because a few atoms decided to stick together billions of years ago. Water didn't just arrive, it persisted. And in doing so, it laid the foundation for everything to come. Earth was once a place of fire and fury. No birds, no blue skies, no gentle waves, just a scorched, chaotic world wrapped in a toxic haze. Picture a planet still forming. Its surface a churning ocean of molten rock constantly bombarded by space debris. Volcanoes belched noxious gases into the air. And the crust, such as it was, cracked and shifted like drying clay. It wasn't exactly the kind of place you'd bring a picnic, but somehow from that chaos, something cool and familiar began to take shape. Oceans. The transformation began with steam, not the cozy kind rising from a mug, but vast planet wrapping clouds of vapor escaping from the Earth's interior. As the planet cooled, this water vapor condensed, forming clouds dense enough to block out the young sun. And then it began to rain. Really rain. For millions of years, the deluge continued, water hammering down on barren rock, carving channels, and pooling into the first great seas. If you could stand on Earth back then, ideally in a very sturdy raincoat, you'd witness a planet being softened drop by drop. These early oceans weren't the tranquil blue expanses we imagine today. They were hot, acidic, and constantly stirred by the geothermal activity. The Earth's interior remained immensely hot, and underwater volcanoes dotted the ocean floor like fiery acne. Massive plumes of mineral-rich water spewed from hydrothermal vents, creating surreal alien landscapes beneath the waves. The water was rich in iron and other dissolved minerals, giving it a murky, sometimes reddish tint. Less Caribbean paradise, more steamy mineral soup. It was in this rowing environment that the oceans began to reshape the planet's crust. Water is an excellent sculptor. Given enough time, it seeps into cracks, freezes, expands, and breaks rock apart. It carries sediment from one place to another, smoothing jagged surfaces and etching out the first primitive reveres. In short, it started giving Earth a bit of personality. Geologically speaking, water had another superpower. It helped form the continents. As the early oceans spread, they cooled the Earth's crust, allowing it to harden and thicken in places. These thicker areas became the seeds of continents, slowly rising above the sea like shy islands emerging from a bath. Tectonic plates began to drift and jostle, driven in part by the water circulating through the crust and mantle. It was the beginning of plate tectonics, a slow-motion continental shuffle that still continues today. All the while, water didn't just sit politely on the surface. It wormed its way into rocks, got sucked into minerals, and was even dragged down into the mantle at subduction zones. That's right. Earth's interior contains vast quantities of water locked away deep below our feet. In fact, some studies suggest that there may be more water hidden within the Earth's mantle than in all the oceans combined. It's just not the kind you can swim in, unless you're particularly fond of molten rock. Meanwhile, up at the surface, the sky was beginning to clear. As the atmosphere cooled and stabilized, it started to resemble something breathable. Eventually, the constant. Rain helped scrub the air of carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide, allowing the planet to transition from an opaque hellscape to a somewhat more hospitable environment. Sunlight finally began to reach the surface, and with it came energy enough to set the stage for life. But life didn't exactly pop out with a splash. It crept in quietly, almost shyly, probably somewhere deep in the ocean where things were relatively stable. Tiny self-replicating molecules began to assemble using the warm, mineral-rich water as a kind of laboratory. These early replicators didn't have DNA or cell walls or dreams of grandeur. They were just chemistry doing its thing. But in time, they gave rise to the first simple cells. Water was essential in this process, not just as a backdrop, but as an active participant. Its solvent properties allowed molecules to move around and interact. Its polarity helped form membranes, the delicate bubbles that eventually became cells. Its thermal stability buffered against temperature swings. It was in every sense the cradle of life. Even today, scientists look to water when they search for life elsewhere. Mars, Europa, and Enceladus. These distant worlds draw our attention not because they have cities or highways, but because they might have liquid water. Wherever water flows, thinking goes, life might follow. Back on Earth, water continued its quiet revolution. As the oceans grew deeper and more stable, they began to influence the climate. Water absorbs and stores heat, helping to moderate temperature extremes. The first hints of weather patterns began to emerge. Currents, winds, storms. It was still a wild world, but now it had rhythm. It was less of a tantrum, more of a heartbeat. Eventually, the oceans began to develop layers. Sunlight could only penetrate so far, so the upper regions known as the photic zone became home to early photosynthetic organisms. These microscopic pioneers like cyanobacteria began to release oxygen as a byproduct of their metabolism. Slowly, oxygen began to accumulate in the atmosphere, triggering one of the most profound shifts in Earth's history, the Great Oxidation Event. It's a charming irony that water, having once come from the stars and reshaped the land, now helped create the sky as we know it. Through photosynthesis, driven by sunlight and powered by water, the air began to fill with oxygen, enabling more complex life to eventually evolve. Water wasn't just setting the stage, it was directing the entire play. And while all this was happening, the oceans never stopped moving. Waves lapped, tides pulled, and currents swirled. Driven by the moon's gravity and the sun's heat, the oceans became Earth's great engine, a global conveyor belt, transferring heat, nutrients, and life itself across the planet. The same forces that shaped coastlines and sculpted underwater mountains also helped regulate the climate and support ecosystems. From the first trickle to the mighty deep, Earth's oceans were never just a feature. They were a force born from fire and tempered by rain. They took a lifeless volcanic sphere and turned it into a water world. And though it took millions of years, the result was something quietly extraordinary. A blue planet spinning in space, ready for whatever came next. Life, as it turns out, has a taste for drama, and water was its stage. Long before dinosaurs stomped through swamps or humans tiptoed across riverbanks, something extraordinary was unfolding beneath the waves. Tiny invisible sparks of life were forming, multiplying, and slowly, very slowly, turning a barren planet into a living one. And through it all, water wasn't just watching from the sidelines. It was absolutely essential to the entire performance. If you were to rewind the Earth's clock to around 38.8 billion years ago, you'd find a very different world. The oceans were already present, stretching out beneath a still hazy sky. There were no continents as we know them, just scattered volcanic islands and seafloor spreading zones. But deep in the dark crevices of the sea, particularly around hydrothermal vents, something caily astonishing was taking place. Here, amid mineral-rich plumes and boiling heat, the first forms of life may have emerged. These deep-sea vents offered a stable, energy-rich environment. Superheated water, laced with iron and sulfur compounds, gushed from the Earth's crust. It's not exactly where you'd expect life to show up, but it makes a weird kind of sense. The chemistry here is ideal for sparking complex reactions and the temperature gradients provide natural energy sources like plugging in a cell phone made of molecules. One leading theory, known as the hydrothermal vent hypothesis, suggests that these locations provided the perfect mix of heat, minerals, and water to foster the rise of life. Organic molecules could assemble on mineral surfaces protected from harmful ultraviolet radiation by the ocean's depth. Over time, they may have formed membranes, primitive bubbles that trapped molecules inside. Once those bubbles could replicate and store information, they weren't just chemistry anymore. They were biology. Water made all of this possible. It's a solvent like no other, able to dissolve salts, sugars, gases, and all sorts of complicated organic molecules. That flexibility allows chemical reactions to take place quickly and efficiently, which is kind of the point of being alive. Without water, the first biochemical steps toward life would have been like trying to play chess without a board. There's nowhere for anything to go. Even now, every living cell relies on water inside you, and in every tree, fish, mushroom, and bacterium. Water is the setting for life's most important chemistry. Your blood, your sweat, your tears, they're all mostly water. And not just any water, but water that participates, facilitates, and on occasion complicates the reactions that keep you ticking. Water dissolves nutrients, transports oxygen, regulates temperature, and helps enzymes do their molecular magic. It also has a hand in shaping molecules themselves. Proteins, for instance, fold into intricate shapes that determine how they function. That folding depends on the watery environment around them. Some parts of the protein are drawn to water while others hide from it. The result is a beautifully specific 3D structure like origami, but slimier and much more useful. Without water, proteins wouldn't fold correctly. Without properly folded proteins, you don't get functioning cells. And without those, well, you're just a puddle of potential. Another water-dependent miracle, DNA. That famous double helix structure, the twisted ladder that holds the instructions for all living things, depends on water to maintain its shape and stability. The hydrogen bonds that connect the rungs of the ladder, those at and CG pairings, rely on the properties of water to form and hold. Even the way DNA replicates itself is soaked in hydration. Enzymes that unzip the strands, copy the code, and stitch everything back together all work best in water-rich environments. So, it's not just that life uses water. Life needs water, like bread needs heat, or bedtime stories need a comfy pillow. Without it, life, as we know it, simply doesn't happen. Once those first life forms got going, it didn't stay tiny forever. Over time, single-celled organisms diversified. Some learned to harvest energy from the sun through photosynthesis, using water in the process. In fact, early photosynthesizers like cyanobacteria split water molecules to capture electrons, releasing oxygen as a waste product. That little chemical trick would go on to change the entire atmosphere. Imagine that. Water not only helped life begin, but was then broken apart by life, sparking the Great Oxidation Event when oxygen levels in the air began to rise for the first time. It wasn't immediate. It took millions of years, but thanks to sunlight, carbon dioxide, and lots of ocean water, Earth's sky eventually turned blue, and the stage was set for more complex life. At some point, life got ambitious. Multicellular organisms began to appear. Organisms with specialized cells that work together. These organisms needed more than just water as a backdrop. They needed internal plumbing. They developed systems to move water around their bodies, to carry nutrients, remove waste, and maintain balance. Even today, nearly every multicellular creature relies on a circulatory system where water is the main ingredient. Blood, sap, lymph, it's all essentially water with benefits. And then came the leap from water to land. That required some serious evolutionary creativity. Life had to figure out how to hold on to water in dry environments, how to breathe without gills, and how to reproduce without simply releasing eggs and sperm into the current. The first land plants developed waxy coatings to prevent dehydration. Animals evolved kidneys to recycle water, and lungs to keep respiratory tissues moist. Every step on a dry land came with a splash of water behind it, as if life couldn't bear to leave its first home behind entirely. Even today, our connection to water is unshakable. Our bodies are mostly water, roughly 60% for adults, more if you're a newborn or particularly squishy. Our brains, our hearts, our muscles, every beat and breath depends on water to function. You could go for weeks without food, but just a few days without water, and your body starts staging protests. And so, water remains the thread running through it all. From those mysterious hydrothermal vents to the cells in your skin, it connects every chapter of life's story. Not just a setting, but a participant, a companion, a co-conspirator. It didn't just allow life to begin. It stuck around to help it thrive, adapt, and grow. Water is the original multitasker, the ever-patient collaborator, the quiet hero behind every heartbeat and every leaf on every tree. It's easy to forget, in the rush of daily life, just how miraculous this substance really is. But every time you take a sip or hear the rain against your window or float in the sea, you're touching the same molecule that's been here since the beginning. And if it could talk, it would have quite the story to tell. It's easy to imagine Earth as a stable, predictable place. The continents sit quietly where they are. Rivers run politely to the sea, and oceans more or less stay where we've drawn their borders on maps. But rewind the clock, and you'll see a very different picture. One of constant motion, shifting waters, and dramatic climate swings. Earth's history is not a gentle trickle. It's a rushing, roaring saga of floods, freezes, and fantastical inland seas. And through it all, water has remained the ever-moving artist, reshaping the planet again and again. To begin this watery journey, let's dive into the ice ages. Not just one, mind you. There have been many. Earth has cycled through periods of intense cold for hundreds of millions of years. These aren't the kind of winters where you dig out your wool socks and complain about the heating bill. These were full-blown planetary deep freezes with massive glaciers stretching down from the poles, covering much of the land in thick, grinding sheets of ice. The most dramatic of these occurred around 700 million years ago in a period so chilly it's nicknamed Snowball Earth. During this time, it's believed that ice reached all the way to the equator. The oceans froze over, continents were locked under glaciers, and sunlight reflected off the white surface, making things even colder. It was the kind of weather that would make even penguins say, you know what? Let's migrate south. How does something like this even happen? Well, it turns out water plays a central role. When temperatures begin to fall, more snow and ice accumulate. Ice is very reflective. It bounces sunlight back into the space instead of absorbing it. This creates a feedback loop. More ice means more reflection, which means even colder temperatures, which leads to even more ice. Once that cycle starts, it can be hard to stop. Earth doesn't have a thermostat, but if it did, water would be the one constantly fiddling with the dial. But just as water helps freeze the planet, it also helps thaw it. During these deep freezes, volcanic activity didn't stop. Carbon dioxide continued to seep into the atmosphere from eruptions, slowly building up. Since there were no plants or liquid oceans to absorb it, the CO2 levels skyrocketed. Eventually, this greenhouse gas trap caused the planet to warm again, melting glaciers, freeing the oceans, and throwing Earth back into a warmer phase. Cue the Great Melt. These thaw periods weren't gentle springtimes. They were cataclysmic releases of water. Glaciers melted at a staggering rate, pouring water across the land, carving valleys, and raising sea levels dramatically. Imagine entire continents shedding ice like winter coats, releasing floodwaters that reshaped landscapes. In a matter of years, rivers roared, lakes burst their banks, and the seas surged forward, claiming new territory. One spectacular example of glacial power is the formation of the Great Lakes in North America. These vast bodies of water were carved out by glaciers during the last ice age around 10,000 to 20,000 years ago. As the ice advanced, it scraped away soil and rock, deepening valleys. When it eventually retreated, melt water filled the newly formed basins, giving us the lakes we know today. That peaceful canoe ride in Ontario thanked a 2 kilometers thick wall of moving ice. But glaciers didn't just shape lakes. They also created enormous inland seas. At the end of the last ice age, North America held one of the largest freshwater lakes ever to exist, Lake Agassiz. Bigger than all the modern Great Lakes combined, it stretched across parts of what are now Canada and the northern United States. When its ice dams eventually broke, the resulting floods were unimaginably vast. One such release, known as the Laurent Tide Outburst Flood, is thought to have temporarily disrupted ocean currents and possibly even climate patterns across the globe. It's one of those moments in history where a lake decided it was tired of being a lake and wanted to see the world very quickly. And this wasn't just a North American phenomenon. Inland seas have appeared and disappeared across every continent. In the Mesozoic era, for example, large parts of Europe and Central North America were underwater. The Western Interior Seaway split North America in two, turning it into a pair of islands with a warm, shallow sea in between. If you'd lived back then, you could have taken a leisurely swim from what's now Texas to the Dakotas, assuming you didn't mind sharing the water with giant marine reptiles. These inland seas weren't static ponds. They expanded and contracted with changing climates, tectonic shifts, and sea levels. Water moved as continents drifted, as mountain ranges rose, and as polar ice waxed and waned. Rivers changed course, deserts bloomed into oases, and what was once seabed became mountaintop. Even now, many desert regions show signs of a wetter past. The Sahara, for example, was once green and dotted with lakes. Around 10,000 years ago, it hosted human settlements along what are now dry basins. Today's arid landscape hides the ghost of a very different past, preserved in rock art, fossils, and long-dried reveres. All of this reshaping is thanks to water's persistence and patience. It's not in a rush, but it's always working, eroding, dissolving, transporting, depositing. Over time, it sculpts canyons, levels mountains, and builds new land. One of the most stunning examples is the Grand Canyon, a monument to the slow, steady work of the Colorado River. For millions of years, it's cut its way through layers of rock, exposing the Earth's deep past like pages in a geologic diary. Water also builds as much as it destroys. Rivers deposit silt that creates fertile floodplains. Glaciers leave behind moraines, ridges of rock and debris that define landscapes. Coastal currents shape beaches and deltas, creating new habitats. Coral reefs built by tiny marine organisms form massive underwater cities that support vibrant ecosystems. Wherever water flows, it leaves its mark. Even today, water continues to transform the planet. Melting glaciers are raising sea levels. Permafrost is thawing. Rivers are shifting. Deltas are eroding or growing depending on how we treat them. These changes are no longer purely natural. Human activity has added a new, faster layer to the story. Climate change driven by our emissions is accelerating the water cycle, causing more intense storms, faster glacier melt, and rising seas. It's a reminder that while water may seem gentle, it is never passive. Still, there's something comforting with it about the idea that water has been through all of this before. It has frozen solid, boiled into steam, flowed across continents, and carved valleys that stretch for miles. It has survived asteroid impacts, mass extinctions, and tectonic tantrums. Through it all, it has persisted, shifting, shaping, and sometimes surprising us. Wherever it goes, water leaves behind clues to its journey. Fossilized wave patterns in ancient rock, ripple marks from long-vanished streams, salt flats that were once shallow seas. These are the footprints of water etched into the crust of the Earth. They remind us that our planet is not fixed, but fluid. And in that fluidity lies its beauty. The story of Earth's watery transformations is a story of resilience and change. It's a reminder that nothing stays the same, that landscapes shift, and that sometimes the most powerful force is not fire or stone, but a simple drop of water repeated billions and billions of times. By now, water had spent billions of years shaping the planet, carving rivers, filling oceans, burying deserts under floods, and freezing mountains under glaciers. But then a peculiar creature came along. It stood upright, made tools, and stared at the stars, and more importantly, it got thirsty. Thus began a new chapter in water's story, one where it became not just a force of nature, but a partner in survival, a subject of reverence, and sometimes a source of conflict. This chapter belongs to us, the humans, or more accurately, the very thirsty apes. From the very beginning, water determined where humans could thrive. Our early ancestors didn't choose their homes at random. They followed the water. Rivers, lakes, and springs were magnets for early hominins, offering drinking water, food, and fertile land. In the dry savannas of Africa, where early humans first emerged, water holes weren't just lifelines. They were hubs of activity, places where all manner of creatures gathered. Being close to water meant having access to fish, reeds, clay, and animals. It also meant danger because everyone wanted a sip. As humans became more mobile, they migrated along water routes. Some of the earliest human migrations out of Africa followed the coastlines where food was abundant and fresh water was within reach. Rivers served as natural highways, guiding people deep into new territories. The Nile, the Tigris and Euphrates, the Indus, the Yangtze. These rivers weren't just geographic features. They were cradles of civilization. Settling near water wasn't just convenient. It was essential. Early villages became towns, and towns became cities, almost always built around some reliable source of fresh water. The patterns of these settlements are so consistent that archaeologists can often guess where ancient sites might be based on nearby rivers or springs. In dry regions, even a trickle of water could support a flourishing community. Water didn't just sustain life. It shaped how people thought. Nearly every ancient culture saw water as sacred. In Mesopotamia, the gods were said to dwell in the watery deep, and floods were both feared and worshipped. In ancient Egypt, the Nile was the artery of life, flooding annually with astonishing predictability. That rhythm gave rise to agriculture, calendars, and a belief that the gods were benevolent, or at least organized. Meanwhile, in the Indus Valley, elaborate city planning emerged, complete with sophisticated drainage and bathing facilities. The people of Mohenjo-daro, for example, constructed the Great Bath, a public pool surrounded by brick colonnades complete with steps and a drainage system. It may have been used for ritual purification or simply for keeping cool on a hot day. Either way, it shows that humans weren't content to just drink water. We wanted to live with it comfortably, thoughtfully, and with at least a little bit of ceremony. Water also became the center of myths and origin stories. In many cultures, water came first. Primordial oceans from which the world emerged. In Hindu cosmology, the world floats on a vast cosmic ocean. In Greek mythology, the god Oannes circled the earth like a watery belt. In the Bible, Genesis begins with darkness over the surface of the deep. There's something universally resonant about water being there before anything else, silent, vast, unknowable. But while water gave life, it also took it away. Ancient people knew this well. Floods were common, especially for civilizations nestled in fertile river valleys. These floods could be nurturing, depositing rich silt that made agriculture possible, or they could be catastrophic, washing away homes, livestock, and lives. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of humanity's oldest known stories, includes a flood narrative eerily similar to the one later found in the Bible. It seems that wherever humans lived, the water was both a gift and a warning. To harness its power, humans got clever. They dug wells, built canals, and constructed reservoirs. Early irrigation systems allowed farmers to water crops even when the rain didn't come. In places like Mesopotamia and Egypt, this led to agricultural surpluses, which meant fewer people needed to spend all day hunting or foraging. That freed up time for other pursuits like building temples, writing poetry, or inventing taxes. Civilization, in other words, began to bloom around puddles, pools, and ditches. As societies became more complex, so did their water needs. You couldn't have a bustling city without fresh water and a way to remove waste. Enter some of humanity's earliest sanitation systems. The Manawans on Crete built stone aqueducts and indoor plumbing. The people of the Indus Valley had public sewers and private bathrooms long before most of Europe knew what a toilet was. Where there was water management, there was usually health, order, and a certain sense of calm. And where there wasn't, well, history is full of cities brought low by drought, contamination, or poor planning. Trade, too, depended on water. Rivers and seas became commercial arteries. Boats carried goods, people, and ideas across vast distances. The Nile connected distant Egyptian settlements. The Tigris and Euphrates linked the cities of Sumer and Akkad. Later, the Mediterranean would become a superhighway of cultural exchange, with water acting as the invisible thread tying together Greeks, Phoenicians, Egyptians, and Romans. The portability of water, or rather its resistance to being easily portable, also drove innovation. Carrying water is hard, it's heavy, it sloshes, and it doesn't stay fresh forever. Early humans used gourds, skins, pottery, and hollowed-out logs to move it. But large-scale transport was tricky. That challenge pushed societies to build aqueducts, develop better storage systems, and eventually invent plumbing networks. And all the while, humans grew more attached to water's less practical qualities. We swam in it for joy. We bathed in it for purification. We sat beside rivers to reflect, to write poetry, or to toss in small stones and make wishes. Water became emotional, even spiritual or sore. It's no coincidence that so many rituals involve it. Baptisms, ablutions, tea ceremonies, and sacred baths. To touch water was to connect with something ancient, something eternal. It's also worth noting that water began to influence language and thought. In many cultures, words for river are among the oldest known in their respective languages. The flow of time is often compared to the flow of water. We say emotions well up. People go with the flow, and history runs deep. Even our metaphors are hydrated. Yet despite all this disreverence, we didn't always live in harmony with water. As cities grew, rivers were diverted, wetlands drained, and wells overused. In some places, water became a source of tension. Neighboring communities squabbled over access to springs or irrigation rights. Control over water often meant control over land, power, and survival. And while humans could channel water to their benefit, they could never quite tame it. When floods came or wells dried up, people were reminded that they were never fully in charge. Still, there's something remarkable about our species' relationship with water. We didn't invent it. We didn't create it, but we learned to follow it, worship it, use it, and live by it. We built our homes beside it. We passed down stories about it. And we learned generation after generation that where there is water, there is life. Even now, in our hyper-connected, electrified world, that lesson remains true. The coffee in your mug, the shower you took this morning, the cells in your skin, each one is part of a tradition stretching back through eons. A tradition written not on paper or stone, but carried gently by the current. Water, after all, doesn't just remember the past. It is the past moving quietly through the present and preparing to shape whatever comes next. Water has always had a bit of flair for the dramatic. But when humans got involved, it truly entered its architectural phase. We started building, channeling, diverting, and storing it with an obsession that would impress even the most determined beaver. Wells, aqueducts, fountains, and public baths all sprang from one essential truth. We love water and will move mountains, or at least a lot of bricks to get it where we want it. Let's start with wells. At first glance, a well is just a hole in the ground. But don't let the simplicity fool you. Digging down to find groundwater was one of humanity's most crucial innovations. Some of the earliest known wells date back over 7,000 years, like those found in Cyprus and the Czech Republic. Imagine the joy of early communities when they discovered they could access fresh water without trekking to a distant river, dodging predators, or competing with other thirsty creatures. A well was more than a hole. It was security, survival, and convenience, all wrapped up in a neat little circle of stones. Groundwater was and still is a lifeline for many regions, especially arid areas with little rainfall or surface water. In ancient Persia, a marvel of engineering emerged to make the most of this hidden supply, the Kanat. These were gently sloping underground channels that tapped into mountain aquifers and carried water downhill to villages and farms. Entire cities blossomed in desert landscapes thanks to these subterranean water highways. They were cool, shaded, and often extended for miles beneath the Earth's surface. It's like humanity's first attempt at plumbing without the unfortunate gurgling noises. And then there were stepwells found mainly in India. These were more than just functional. Many were architectural masterpieces carved in symmetrical, spiraling patterns. Stepwells allowed people to walk down toward the water as its level changed with the seasons. Some were adorned with intricate sculptures and stone pillars resembling sunken temples as much as water sources. They were places of community gathering, worship, and cool refuge from the heat. It's hard not to be a little envious of such stylish hydration points. As societies grew, so did their thirst, not just for drinking, but for bathing, farming, cleaning, and showing off a little. Enter the aqueduct. If you think about it, aqueducts were humanity's way of saying, sure, water's over there, but what if we brought it here? Instead, the Romans, of course, get most of the credit, and rightly so. They perfected the aqueduct system, turning water delivery into a high art. Roman aqueducts were stone and concrete marvels, carrying water over hills and across valleys, often over vast distances. Some aqueducts spanned over 50 m, delivering millions of gallons of water daily to cities, towns, and farmlands. And that they weren't just practical, they were iconic. Those soaring arches still standing across parts of Europe are testaments to the ingenuity and ambition of a civilization that had understood just how vital water was. The water didn't just arrive and disappear either. Once in the city, it was distributed with remarkable efficiency. Lead and terracotta pipes carried it into homes, fountains, and most famously public baths. The Romans loved their baths. These weren't just places to scrub behind the ears. They were social hubs, cultural centers, and architectural statements. The larger complexes included heated rooms, cold plunges, steam baths, massage areas, exercise courts, libraries, and sometimes even snack bars. Imagine a modern-day gym, spa, community center, and water park all rolled into one. And you've got the idea. Bathing was a ritual, and everyone was invited, from senators to slaves. The water flowed constantly, ensuring cleanliness and freshness. Engineers designed clever drainage systems so wastewater didn't stagnate or spread disease. It was a public good, funded by the state, and symbolized the Roman commitment to hygiene and civic life. If you were lucky enough to live in a city with aqueducts, your daily routine might include a long soak, some light gossip, and a surprisingly good lunch. But it wasn't just the Romans who elevated water infrastructure. The ancient Greeks had elaborate fountain houses and water clocks. The Chinese developed canals and irrigation systems that turned the Yellow River into a tool for agriculture and transport. In the Americas, the Inca engineered mountain aqueducts and terrace fields using gravity to channel water with an incredible precision. Wherever humans lived, they found ways to work with water, to bend it, store it, and celebrate it. Take, for example, the ancient Nabotans who built the city of Petra in the Arab deserts of what is now Jordan. They chiseled channels into solid rock, capturing flash floods and directing them to systems and underground reservoirs. Their city thrived in a place where nature said it shouldn't, all because they mastered the art of liquid logistics. Of course, not all water management was so noble. Sometimes it was about power. In ancient societies, control over water often meant control over people. Kings, priests, and emperors built massive reservoirs and irrigation systems, not just to feed their citizens, but to remind them who made the crops grow. In Egypt, the annual flooding of the Nile was both a miracle and a political tool. If the water levels were just right, the harvest would be abundant, and the pharaoh could claim divine favor. If they weren't, well, somebody had to take the blame, and it wasn't going to be the gods. Still, for the most part, water. Infrastructure was a unifying force. It brought people together physically in shared spaces like wells and baths, and socially through shared reliance on something precious and limited. Public fountains served as gathering spots. Laundry areas became gossip centers. Even today, people meet at water coolers, though now discussions are less about crop yields and more about office coffee. The act of managing water also shaped how we understood the world. Ancient engineers had to measure flow rates, estimate pressure, and understand gradients. In doing so, they contributed to early mathematics, physics, and even hydrology. Observing how water behaved, how it flowed, pulled, and evaporated helped spark scientific curiosity. Why does it rise in narrow tubes? Why does it carve out rock? Why does it always seek the lowest point? These questions didn't just lead to better plumbing. They laid the groundwork for entire scientific disciplines. Fluid dynamics, geology, meteorology all have their roots in humanity's efforts to understand and control water. And let's be honest, we're still fascinated by it. There's something hypnotic about the way water moves. Whether it's a mountain stream, a bubbling spring, or a perfectly synchronized Roman fountain, we can't help but watch. So, here we are thousands of years later, still building, still channeling, still trying to get water to go where we want it. We've swapped stone aqueducts for steel pipes and marble bath for tiled showers, but the essence remains the same. Water connects us to each other, to our ancestors, and to the landscapes we call home. In every modern city, beneath the asphalt and concrete, a vast network of waterworks hums away, pumps, pipes, treatment plants, all designed to do what ancient engineers once did with gravity and grit. And as we sip, soak, and shower, we're participating in a tradition as old as civilization itself. Because in the end, we're not so different from those early well diggers and bathhouse builders. We still need water. We still gather around it. We still marvel at its beauty and bend it to our needs. And we still find joy in the simple act of turning a tap and watching water flow. It's ordinary. It's miraculous. And it's always been a part of our story. For most of human history, clean drinking water was a bit of a gamble. You could scoop up a crystal-clear cup full from a babbling brook and feel like you were living your best pastoral life, only to find yourself regretting every sip a few hours later. The concept of clean water, at least by modern standards, is relatively new. For thousands of years, people often drank whatever was wet and hoped for the best. And let's just say, sometimes the best didn't happen. In ancient times, humans didn't really understand the concept of germs. To be fair, you can't exactly blame them. Bacteria are small and don't come with warning signs. If water looked clean and tasted fine, people assumed it was safe. But behind that fresh appearance could lurk a microbial jungle of unsavory characters. Ely, cholera, giardia, and their many tiny friends. And yet, despite the ignorance of microbiology, ancient people did develop a few clever ways of improving their water, at least a little. Some of the earliest water purification methods came from ancient India and Egypt. Texts from India dating back nearly 2,000 years describe techniques such as boiling, sun exposure, and filtering water through cloth or sand. The Sanskrit text Sashuddha Samhita mentions placing water in copper vessels and filtering it with charcoal. Methods that modern science now recognizes as genuinely effective. Copper has antimicrobial properties, and charcoal can absorb impurities. Not bad for a pre-germ theory civilization. The ancient Egyptians used alum, a compound that causes particles in water to clump together and settle out. It's still used today in modern water treatment. They also believed in the power of boiling, straining, and even praying of water, covering all the bases just in case. In Greece and Rome, public fountains and aqueducts provided relatively fresh water. But sanitation wasn't always top-in or top-notch. While wealthy Romans had running water and private baths, sewage systems didn't always keep up with demand. And let's not forget the pipes, many of which were made of lead. Yes, lead. It's possible that Roman elites were unknowingly dosing themselves with tiny amounts of neurotoxin every time they had a sip or took a bath. Not exactly the most refreshing thought. Meanwhile, in medieval Europe, water's reputation took a serious nosedive. Rivers and wells, once central to city life, became dumping grounds. Human waste, animals' rem, and industrial runoff flowed freely into water sources. By the 14th century, many urban rivers were so polluted that people refer to them with grim nicknames. London's River Fleet was known for its black and noisome stench. It wasn't just dirty, it was deadly. Faced with undrinkable water, many Europeans turned to a somewhat boozy solution: beer and wine. These beverages, especially when diluted, were considered safer than water. The alcohol content and boiling during brewing helped kill off pathogens. Monasteries became centers of brewing, and even children drank what was called small beer, a weak, low-alcohol version designed to hydrate without the hangover. Water was for washing, sometimes brewing, definitely, and occasionally floating waste downstream. But even beer couldn't save cities from the public health crisis that would eventually erupt. By the 19th century, rapidly growing industrial cities like London, Paris, and New York faced a crisis. Overcrowding and poor waste disposal turned rivers and wells into breeding grounds for disease. One particularly gruesome example was the Great Stink of London in 1858, when a hot summer turned the Thames into a foul, reeking slurry. The smell was so overpowering that it halted parliamentary sessions. Lawmakers had to soak curtains in lime and vinegar just to breathe. The smell was awful, but the consequences were worse. Cholera outbreaks swept through cities, killing tens of thousands. For years, the prevailing theory was mythma, the idea that diseases were caused by bad air. People believed the stink itself was deadly, so they burned incense and held perfumed handkerchiefs to their noses, unknowingly ignoring the real culprit, the contaminated water. And then came one of the most quietly revolutionary moments in medical history. In 1854, during a cholera outbreak in London, a physician named John Snow conducted a study of the cases. He famously mapped the infections and traced them to a single public water pump on Broad Street. After persuading officials to remove the pump handle, the outbreak slowed dramatically. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was a powerful hint that water, not air, was to blame. Dr. Snow's work laid the foundation for the modern understanding of waterborne diseases and the need for clean water systems. Soon after, major cities began investing in proper sewage systems and water treatment facilities. Engineers like Joseph Bazalgette designed vast underground networks to carry waste away from drinking water sources. The invention of sand filtration, followed by chlorination in the early 20th century, transformed water from a health hazard into something safe, reliable, and downright miraculous. Chlorination in particular was a game-changer. By adding tiny amounts of chlorine to water supplies, municipalities could kill off most harmful bacteria and viruses. It was cheap, effective, and scalable. Within a few decades, it had saved millions of lives. The once unthinkable idea of turning on a tap and drinking straight from it became a standard part of life in many countries. Of course, clean water didn't reach everyone equally. In many parts of the world, access to safe drinking water remained a challenge. And in some places, it still is. Even today, billions of people lack reliable access to clean water. And waterborne diseases remain a leading cause of death, especially for children. But progress continues. New filtration methods, UV sterilization, reverse osmosis, and even portable purification tablets have helped bring cleaner water to communities in need. Organizations around the world are working to build wells, sanitation systems, and education programs. The dream of safe water for all may still be on the horizon, but it's getting closer. Back in our everyday lives, it's easy to forget how recently clean water became normal. That glass of tap water won't send you running for the nearest medieval remedy is historically speaking a luxury of astonishing proportions. We've gone from boiling and praying to filtering and chlorinating. And yet, the substance itself remains as ancient and essential as ever. Even our bottled water obsession, while modern branding, is old in spirit. Throughout history, people have sought out special waters, springs with healing properties, sacred rivers, and mineral baths. Today's smart water, vitamin water, and glacier-imported bottles are just the newest incarnation of that age-old desire to sip something pure, powerful, and just a little bit magical. There's also something quietly poetic about the fact that water, which once carried so much danger, now flows invisibly beneath our cities, through our homes, and into our glasses. It's not flashy. It doesn't demand attention. But every drop represents centuries of trial, error, invention, and insight. Clean water is quite literally science at your fingertips. So next time you take a drink, pause for just a second. That water, clear, cold, and safe, didn't get there by accident. It's the product of generations of ingenuity. From copper pots and boiling fires to underground pipes and UV rays. And if you can enjoy it without fear, you're part of one of humanity's greatest quiet achievements. All from a simple sip. Water may look simple, clear, tasteless, odorless, but beneath its quiet surface lies a scientific marvel. It's not just wet stuff that fills lakes and glasses. It's a chemical masterpiece with a personality all its own. If water were a person, it'd be the one who never makes a scene, but holds the whole party together. Versatile, reliable, quietly dramatic. H2O is the unsung hero of chemistry, physics, and biology alike. Let's start with the basics. One oxygen atom, two hydrogen atoms bound together in a neat little shape. That's it, H2O. But that angle, roughly 1,045 degrees, gives water some of its most important characteristics. It creates a polar molecule, meaning one end near the oxygen has a slight negative charge, while the other end with the hydrogens carries a slight positive charge. This uneven distribution of charge makes water sticky at the molecular level, able to form hydrogen bonds with other water molecules and a wide range of other substances. This molecular stickiness is responsible for some of the water's most remarkable traits. Take surface tension, for example. Water molecules at the surface don't have other water molecules pulling on them from above, so they cling more tightly to those around them, creating a kind of invisible skin. That's why small insects like water striders can glide across ponds without sinking. It's also why water forms droplets rather than flattening out into little puddles of disappointment. Then there's cohesion, the tendency of water molecules to stick to each other, and adhesion, the tendency to stick to other materials. Together, these properties give rise to capillary action, the reason water can defy gravity and move upward through tiny spaces. It's how trees and plants draw water from their roots all the way to their leaves. Picture it. Millions of trees performing daily miracles just so their leaves don't wilt. All thanks to water's clingy tendencies. Water also has a high specific heat capacity, meaning it takes a lot of energy to raise its temperature. This is a good thing, an excellent thing actually, because it helps stabilize Earth's climate. Large bodies of water like oceans and lakes absorb and store heat, releasing it slowly over time. This moderates temperature extremes, making coastal areas more temperate and life more bearable for everything from polar bears to palm trees. Without water's heat buffering abilities, Earth would experience wild temperature swings between day and night, summer and winter. You need a parka, a swimsuit, and possibly a spacesuit just to survive a single week. But water doesn't just store heat, it also moves it. Ocean currents act like conveyor belts, transporting warm water from the equator toward the poles and cold water back again. This process, known as thermohaline circulation, plays a critical role in regulating global climate patterns. The Gulf Stream, for instance, brings warm water from the Gulf of Mexico across the Atlantic, giving much of Western Europe its relatively mild weather. Without it, places like London might feel a lot more like Labrador. Then there's water's ability to dissolve things. It is often called the universal solvent, not because it dissolves everything. Try ducking your headphones in it, but because it dissolves more substances than any other liquid. This is due to its polarity. The positive and negative ends of water molecules can surround and separate ions and molecules, breaking them apart and carrying them off into the solution. This is how salt dissolves. In soup, how nutrients travel through your bloodstream, and how coffee, blessed coffee, draws flavor from the bean. Speaking of weird things water does, let's talk about ice. Most substances become denser as they freeze, but water does the opposite. Ice floats. That's not just a quirky party trick. It's crucial for life on Earth. When water freezes, its molecules arrange themselves into a crystalline structure that takes up more space than in liquid form. That expansion makes ice less dense, so it floats on top of liquid water instead of sinking. If ice sank, winter would be a death sentence for aquatic life. Lakes and ponds would freeze from the bottom up, trapping fish and other organisms beneath ever-thickening layers of ice. Instead, ice floats on the surface, insulating the water below and allowing ecosystems to survive even in freezing temperatures. It's a bizarre anomaly, but a very fortunate one. Water is also essential for the chemistry of life itself. Many biochemical reactions can only happen in water-based environments. Inside your cells, enzymes rely on the fluid medium to meet their molecular dance partners. Proteins fold into their functional shapes in watery surroundings. DNA's double helix is stabilized by interactions with water molecules. In fact, if you were to remove all the water from your body, which to be clear, you should not attempt, you'd be left with a pile of dry molecules and absolutely no functioning life. You'd be scientifically fascinating, but also extremely not alive. Even beyond the realm of biology, water performs quietly. Astonishing feats. Take phase changes, evaporation, condensation, melting, and freezing. Each of these processes involves energy, either absorbing or releasing it. When water evaporates, it takes heat with it, which is why sweating cools you down. When water condenses into clouds, it will release heat into the atmosphere, fueling weather systems. Water's ability to switch between states, storing and releasing energy as it does, powers everything from thunderstorms to hurricanes to the cup of tea steaming beside your bed. Let's not forget about pressure. Water is nearly incompressible, which makes it ideal for transmitting force. That's the principle behind hydraulic system. From car brakes to heavy machinery. Press down on a fluid in one part of a sealed system, and that pressure gets transmitted evenly throughout the fluid. Nature figured this out long before we did. Many sea creatures use hydraulic pressure to move limbs or extend parts of their body. Sea stars, for instance, don't have muscles in the way we do. They use seawater to operate their tube. Feet. Water is also a master sculptor. Over time, it carves canyons, shapes coastlines, and hollows out caves. With just persistence and patience, it turns solid rock into sand. Rivers slice through mountains. Raindrops wear down statues, even glaciers. Frozen water slowly creeping across the land. Grind valleys into U shapes and leave behind lakes and marines. Give water enough time, and it'll rearrange the landscape like a quiet artist working on an endless canvas. And here's a final oddity to ponder. Water is one of the only substances that reaches its maximum density not at freezing point, but at 4 degrees cool. That means that cold water sinks until it hits 4 degrees. Below that, it starts rising again as it gets ready to become ice. This property plays a role in lake turnover, a seasonal phenomenon that helps circulate nutrients and oxygen. In spring and autumn, water layers shift and mix, keeping aquatic ecosystems healthy. Again, a quiet miracle. Nature doing maintenance work with elegant precision. Something so simple in formula. Water is endlessly complex in behavior. It bends rules. It holds things together. It nourishes, cools, aerates, and flows. We walk through its vapor, drink its liquid, skate on its solid form. It is everywhere, always changing, always vital. And yet, despite its abundance, water remains deeply mysterious. Scientists are still uncovering new quirks about its molecular structure, how it behaves under extreme conditions, and why it seems to defy expectations in so many delightful ways. So the next time you hold a glass of water in your hand, remember you're not just holding a drink. You're holding a substance that stores the sun's heat, sculpts mountains, fuels your cells, and suspends insects on its surface. It's ancient. It's ordinary. It's astonishing. And it's never just water. Water is always on the move. Even when it looks still, a calm lake at dawn, a drop clinging to a leaf, or a cloud hanging weightlessly in the sky. It's shifting, cycling, transforming. This constant motion isn't random, is one of nature's most elegant and efficient systems, the hydrological cycle. Also known as the water cycle, it's a planetary ballet in which every molecule takes part, moving from ocean to sky to land and back again over and over for billions of years. Let's start at the beginning, or rather one of many beginnings. Evaporation. Powered by the sun, water from oceans, lakes, rivers, and even puddles turns into vapor and rises into the atmosphere. It's a quiet transformation, invisible to the eye but vast in scale. Every day, the sun lifts trillions of gallons of water skyward without so much as a whisper. It's the original solar-powered engine, turning heat into motion with astonishing grace. But water doesn't just evaporate from open bodies of water. It also escapes through the leaves of plants in a process called transpiration. Together, evaporations and transpiration are known as evapotranspiration, a word that sounds a bit like a magical spell and in a way acts like one. Trees, grasses, and even the moss in your backyard are subtly exhaling moisture into the air, feeding the sky with vapor one breath at a time. As water vapor rises, it cools. The higher it climbs, the lower the temperature until eventually it condenses into tiny droplets. These droplets gather around microscopic particles, dust, salt, pollen, and form clouds. Some clouds float high and wispy, barely hinting at what they hold. Others grow fat and gray, heavy with potential. When enough water collects, gravity takes over. The droplets merge, grow larger, and eventually fall back to Earth as precipitation. Rain, snow, sleet, or hail. Depending on the conditions, a raindrop falling from a cloud has no idea where it's going. It might splash into a stream, sink into soil, or get caught by a leaf. It might freeze on a mountaintop, join a glacier, and not move again for thousands of years. Or it might land in your open mouth as you laugh during a storm. Its fate is uncertain, but its journey is inevitable. It's just passing through on its way to somewhere else. Once water returns to the surface, it takes many paths. Some of it flows down a hill, joining streams and rivers, moving toward larger bodies of water. Some sinks into the ground, percolating through soil and rock to join underground aquifers, vast hidden reservoirs that store water for centuries. Some evaporates again almost immediately, especially in hot, dry climates, and some is taken up by plants, beginning the cycle anew. These movements aren't just scenic, they're essential. Rivers carve landscapes, transport nutrients, and connect ecosystems. Groundwater seeps into springs, feeding lakes and sustaining forests. Floods, while sometimes destructive, also deposit rich silt on floodplains, rejuvenating the soil and setting the stage for agricultural abundance. Even the flow of water underground, called subsurface flow, helps regulate temperature and chemistry in ways we're only beginning to understand. Then there's the ocean, Earth's largest water reservoir and the final destination for much of the cycle. Oceans hold about 97% of all water on Earth, acting as both the origin and the terminus of the hydrological cycle. They're the planet's great cauldron, constantly losing vapor to the atmosphere and regaining it through rivers, glaciers, and rainfall. Ocean currents driven by wind, temperature, and salinity help distribute heat across the globe, influencing weather and climate far beyond the shoreline. Take, for instance, the El Niño Southern Oscillation, a periodic shift in Pacific Ocean temperatures that can alter weather patterns around the world. Or the Indian monsoon, a seasonal wind system driven in part by the difference in temperature between land and sea. These aren't isolated weather quirks. They're intricate dances between ocean and atmosphere choreographed by water and its endless cycle. The hydrological cycle is not a closed loop. It's more like a symphony of loops playing all at once. Water molecules don't travel in straight lines. They meander, linger, rise and fall, freeze and thaw. Some complete the cycle in days. Others take centuries. A single molecule might fall as rain, evaporate again within hours, or be locked in polar ice for millennia. The timelines vary, but the cycle never truly stops. Water's journey through the cycle is also a cleaning process. As it evaporates, impurities are left behind, creating vapor that's essentially pure. That's why rainwater, at least in its earliest moments, is so clean. Of course, as it falls through the atmosphere, it can pick up pollutants, everything from dust to industrial emissions. So, what starts as pristine can become less so by the time it reaches the ground. This is one reason why rain in heavily polluted areas can turn acidic, damaging plants, buildings, and aquatic life. Still, the system is remarkably self-correcting. Wetlands filter runoff before it reaches rivers. Soil absorbs and breaks down contaminants. Forests slow erosion and help regulate moisture. Nature has built-in safeguards, living filters, and buffers that help keep the water cycle in balance. When those systems are healthy, the cycle is resilient. When they're damaged, the effects ripple outward. Human activity has a big influence here. Deforestation reduces transpiration and changes rainfall patterns. Urban development covers permeable ground with pavement, leading to more runoff and less infiltration. Overuse of groundwater can lower aquifer levels faster than they can recharge. Climate change driven by greenhouse gas emissions is intensifying parts of the cycle, making storms stronger, droughts longer, and snowpacks less predictable. Warmer air holds more moisture, which means when it rains, it often pours. At the same time, changes in temperature affect how and when snow melts, altering the flow of rivers and the availability of water downstream. Glaciers, the slow-release savings accounts of the water cycle, are shrinking, affecting everything from drinking supplies to sea levels. Despite these challenges, the water cycle remains one of Earth's most beautiful systems. It's incredibly dynamic yet elegantly balanced. It connects every living thing from the smallest moss on a shaded rock to the tallest tree in the Amazon. It links oceans and deserts, mountaintops and meadows, weather and geology. Every drop of water you touch has been part of this cycle, rising, falling, flowing, freezing, and rising again. Even your own body participates. You're made of water, about 60% of you give or take. The water you drink becomes part of your blood, your sweat, your breath. Eventually, it returns to the environment, continuing the cycle. You're quite literally a temporary stop along a molecule's infinite route. The next time you see fog curling along a hillside or frost forming on a window pane or rain splattering against the pavement, think of it not as weather, but as choreography. Water is dancing between states, between locations, between lifetimes. It has been doing this since before the first fish swam or the first fern unfurled. It will continue long after we're gone, weaving itself through time and space with quiet determination. So much of life depends on this silent movement, this rising, condensing, falling, and flowing. The hydrological cycle is not just a system. It's a story, one that plays out across continents and centuries, written in clouds and rivers, puddles and glaciers. And somehow in all its complexity, it always comes back around. There's something quietly miraculous about turning on a tap and watching clear water flow out. No hunting for a spring, no boiling over a fire, no. Straining it through cloth or charcoal. Just a twist of the wrist, and there it is, ready to drink, to cook with, to wash, to fill a bathtub or brew a cup of tea. It feels so normal, so automatic that we rarely stop to think about what a triumph of science, engineering, and sheer determination it really is. Getting water from its natural sources into your glass is no small feat. It's the result of centuries of trial, error, and innovation. Every drop that flows through a faucet has taken a carefully managed journey from reservoir to treatment plant to pipes under streets and floors to reach your sink in a condition that's safe, reliable, and convenient. It's a behind-the-scenes story of invisible infrastructure and unsung systems, all working in harmony to meet one of humanity's most basic needs. Let's begin at the source. Most municipal water starts its journey in one of two places: surface water or groundwater. Surface water comes from lakes, rivers, and reservoirs, large open bodies of water that collect rainfall and snowmelt. Groundwater, on the other hand, is drawn from aquifers, porous layers of rock or sediment that store water underground, often for hundreds or thousands of years. These sources are selected based on availability, sustainability, and water quality. And the choice often depends on geography. In rainy regions, surface water dominates. In drier places, groundwater is king. But whether it starts a mountain lake or an ancient aquifer, raw water isn't usually something you'd want to gulp down immediately. It may contain dirt, algae, bacteria, or tiny bits of whatever the local birds and deer were up to. That's where water treatment comes in, a multi-step process designed to remove contaminants and make water safe to drink. The journey typically begins at an intake point, a structure that draws water from the source and channels it to a treatment facility. There it undergoes several stages of purification. Starting with screening, large debris like leaves, sticks, and wayward tennis balls are filtered out through grates or mesh screens. Then comes coagulation and flocculation, which sound like complex spells from a wizard handbook, but are actually just clever chemistry. In this stage, chemicals called coagulants are added to the water. These coagulants, often aluminum or iron salts, cause small particles to clump together into larger ones called flocks. These flocks are easier to remove and start to settle out of the water. After flocculation comes sedimentation, where the water sits in large tanks and the heavier flocks slowly sink to the bottom. Is gravity doing its thing with remarkable patience? Next, the water moves through filtration. It's passed through layers of sand, gravel, or activated carbon, which catch and remove smaller particles that escaped the earlier stages. Filtration also helps remove some bacteria, parasites, and organic materials that affect taste and smell. What emerges from this process is already looking and tasting a lot more like what you'd expect from a kitchen. Top! But we're not done yet. The final and arguably most critical step is disinfection. To ensure that no harmful microorganisms remain, disinfectants such as chlorine, chloramine, or ozone are added. These chemicals kill bacteria and viruses and protect the water as it travels through the distribution system. Chlorine is especially common because it provides a residual effect, continuing to guard against contamination all the way to your foray. Some treatment plants also add fluoride, a mineral that helps prevent tooth decay. While the practice has sparked debate in some circles, it's widely endorsed by dental and public health organizations as a safe and effective measure to improve oral health, especially in children. With treatment complete, the clean water is ready to enter the distribution system, a vast underground maze of pipes, pumps, valves, and storage tanks. Some of these pipes are ancient relics from earlier eras of infrastructure, while others are brand new, made of corrosion-resistant materials and monitored by digital sensors. Together, they form a hydraulic network that delivers water to homes, schools, hospitals, factories, and fire hydrants. Maintaining this system is a constant effort. Engineers monitor pressure levels, track water quality, and repair leaks, all to ensure that water not only arrives where it's needed, but arrives safely. In many cities, pressure zones are carefully designed so that water flows efficiently, even uphill or across large areas. Booster stations add pressure where needed, and storage tanks help balance supply and demand, especially during peak usage hours. And then, finally, the moment arrives. You open the tap, and out it comes. Clean, clear, life-sustaining water. It's the end of blind for that particular journey, but only for a moment. Because after you've used it, water continues on its path, flowing down drains into sewers, and eventually to wastewater treatment facilities where it's cleaned again before being released back into nature. In some places, it's even purified, enough to be reused for irrigation, industrial process, or even drinking. A concept known as water recycling or toilet to tap, though marketers understandably prefer less vivid terminology. Of course, not all water is tap water. Bottled water is a multi-billion-dollar industry promising purity, flavor, and sometimes a vague sense of prestige. Some bottled water is spring-fed or drawn from artesian wells. Others are simply filtered municipal tap water with fancier labels. While bottled water can be a convenient option, especially in emergencies or areas with compromised water systems, its environmental footprint, plastic waste, transportation emissions, and resource use has raised concerns. Reusable bottles and public refill stations offer a more sustainable alternative for many people. In some parts of the world, access to clean, safe drinking water remains a daily challenge. Communities without infrastructure rely on wells, rainwater collection, or long treks to distant sources. In rural areas of sub-Saharan Africa or parts of South Asia, collecting water is often a time-consuming task disproportionately shouldered by the women and children. Lack of access doesn't just affect hydration. It impacts health, education, and economic opportunity. To address these challenges, a variety of technologies are being deployed. Gravity-fed water systems, solar-powered pumps, and low-cost filtration devices are helping bring safe water to remote areas. Desalination, which removes salt from seawater, is becoming more common in arid regions, though it remains energy-intensive. Meanwhile, smart sensors and real-time monitoring are making urban water systems more efficient and resilient in the face of population growth and climate change. And so, from mountain stream to kitchen tap, water travels a long, engineered road. It's a journey made possible by centuries of human effort by those who dug the first wells, channeled the first aqueducts, and dreamed of cities where clean water could be summoned with a twist of the wrist. It's a marvel of modern life, one that flows so quietly, in a background that we often forget it's there. But every drop that emerges from your faucet carries the weight of that history and the promise of a future where clean water flows for all. So the next time you fill a glass, maybe take a second to appreciate the journey. What seems simple as anything, but it's the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. Clear, cool, and utterly extraordinary. Water has been a patient and generous companion to humanity, flowing freely from rivers, tumbling down from skies, rising from wells with quiet reliability. But in recent years, something has shifted. That once assumed abundance is now showing signs of strain. Across the globe, water is becoming harder to find in some places and far too abundant in others. Droughts stretch on, floods rise faster, glaciers melt, aquifers shrink, and storms become stronger, stranger, and more frequent. This chapter of water's story is no longer about the past. It's about our future, and that future increasingly depends on how we treat this most vital resource. Let's start with the big picture. Earth may be called the blue planet, but only about 25% of all the water on Earth is fresh water. And of that, nearly 70% is locked away in glaciers and ice caps. Less than 1% is easily accessible in lakes, rivers, and shallow aquifers. The stuff we actually rely on for drinking, farming, sanitation, and industry. It's an astonishingly tiny slice of the pie. And yet that sliver supports over 8 billion people, countless ecosystems, and virtually every aspect of modern civilization. As the global population grows and consumption rises, our demand for fresh water increases with it. Agriculture is by far the largest consumer, using roughly 70% of all freshwater withdrawals worldwide. From rice paddies in Asia to almond orchards in California, farming requires vast amounts of water to feed the world. Industry claims another 20%, while domestic use, drinking, cooking, bathing, flushing makes up the remaining 10%. That means even the water in your sandwich had a long journey. Growing the wheat, feeding the livestock, washing the produce, running the factory machinery. But supply doesn't always match demand. In many parts of the world, freshwater sources are being depleted faster than they can be replenished. Aquifers that took thousands of years to fill are being pumped dry in decades. The Ogallala Aquifer in the central United States, one of the largest in the world, has been heavily drawn down to support agriculture. So much so that in some areas, wells have already gone dry. In India, groundwater levels are falling dramatically due to overuse and weak regulations threatening water access for millions. Then there's climate change, the not-so-gentle accelerant that's shaking up the hydrological cycle itself. Warmer temperatures lead to more evaporation, drying out soil, and reducing snowpack in mountains that normally provide a slow, steady water supply in spring and summer. The timing of water availability is changing. Snow melts too early. Rainfall patterns shift. Monsoons come late or not at all. In some places, years of drought are followed by sudden, catastrophic floods, a pattern that's becoming disturbingly common. Consider the Colorado River, which flows through 7 U.S. states and supports some 40 million people. It's been shrinking due to a combination of overuse, prolonged drought, and warming temperatures. Reservoirs like Lake Mead and Lake Powell have reached historic lows, exposing dry, cracked lake beds and even sunken boats. The river is no longer reaching the sea, and communities that depend on it are scrambling to make do with less. At the same time, the other extreme is happening elsewhere. Too much water all at once. Rising sea levels are swallowing coastlines and salting freshwater sources. Extreme storms bring intense rainfall, overwhelming drainage systems, and triggering deadly floods. From Pakistan to Germany to the southern U.S., recent years have seen historic flooding events displacing millions and causing billions in damages. And then there are the invisible threats: pollution, contamination, and mismanagement. Industrial waste, agricultural runoff, and aging infrastructure can all compromise water quality. Fertilizers and pesticides wash into rivers, feeding algae blooms that choke aquatic life and make water undrinkable. In some areas, chemical contamination like PFAS, so-called forever chemicals, have been found in groundwater, raising concerns about long-term health risks. Lead pipes like those at the heart of the Flint, Michigan water crisis still exist in many cities across the globe. Faced with these challenges, it's tempting to feel overwhelmed. But the story of water's future isn't a tragedy. It's a call to action. Around the world, people are finding creative, practical, and sometimes even beautiful ways to conserve, protect, and rethink our relationship with water. One promising solution is water recycling. Rather than letting used water go to waste, advanced treatment systems can clean it to near distilled purity and reuse it for irrigation, industrial processes, and even drinking. Some cities like Singapore have embraced Toiletto tap technology, using a combination of microfiltration, reverse osmosis, and ultraviolet light to recycle wastewater into clean, portable water. It's efficient, cost-effective, and surprisingly elegant, even if the marketing could use a friendlier nickname. Another growing area is desalination, the process of removing salt from seawater. Traditionally seen as too energy-intensive and expensive, newer technologies are making it more viable. Countries like Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates are already using large-scale desalination plants to supply a significant portion of their drinking water. Innovations like solar power desalination and forward osmosis are pushing the boundaries even further. On the conservation front, simple changes can make a big impact. Drip irrigation systems use far less water than traditional sprinklers, delivering moisture directly to plant roots. Water-smart appliances, low-flow fixtures, and leak detection systems help households and businesses use less without sacrificing comfort. Rainwater harvesting, collecting and storing rain for later use, is an ancient practice seeing a modern revival, especially in regions prone to drought. Policy plays a huge role, too. Water rights, pricing structures, and access regulations determine who gets water, how much, and at what cost. Shifting from open access or subsidized systems to carefully managed, equitable ones can improve efficiency and reduce waste. It's not always easy. Water is deeply emotional, and attempts to regulate it often meet resistance. But the alternative is uncontrolled scarcity. Education is perhaps the most powerful tool of all. When people understand where their water comes from, how it's treated, and how fragile the supply can be, they tend to value it more. In schools, in cities, in farming communities, raising awareness helps drive better decisions. And when those decisions are made collectively, the ripple effects can be enormous. The future of water won't be shaped by a single technology or policy. It will be shaped by how we think about water, how we talk about it, and how we teach the next generation to respect it, not as an endless commodity, but as a shared legacy. Because every drop is part of the same cycle, the same planet-wide system. What happens upstream affects those downstream. What we flush, what we pour, what we waste, all of it stays in the loop. We are stewards of a resource that predates us and will outlive us. Water has seen Earth through fire and ice, through extinction and evolution. It flowed beneath the feet of dinosaurs, carried the first cells, filled the baths of emperors, and now spins in washing machines and coffee makers across the world. It connects continents, ecosystems, and cultures. It is humble, ordinary, extraordinary. The good news, water is remarkably forgiving. Treat it well, and it recycles itself. It nourishes, it sustains, it returns. Even now, amid droughts and floods and rising tides, it offers a quiet hope that with care, creativity, and cooperation, we can find a way forward. That this story, like the cycle itself, doesn't have to end. It can keep flowing as long as we're wise enough to listen. And so, we arrive at the end of our journey. Though really, water's story never ends. It flows on, looping from cloud to soil, to stream to sea. Always moving, always changing, always returning. From cosmic origins and interstellar dust to the quiet hiss of your kettle, every drop is a fragment of something ancient, a witness to the unfolding of Earth's story and the many lives it sustains. We've followed water from the stars to the soil, through empires and aqueducts, through the cells in our bodies and the rivers beneath our cities. We've seen it give life, sculpt landscapes, inspire myths, and challenge our ingenuity. And through it all, water has remained the same. Simple in structure, miraculous in function, endlessly patient and powerful. It asks for little, but gives everything. Tonight, as you settle in and let your thoughts begin to drift, perhaps you'll carry a little more wonder for the water around you. The glass on your nightstand, the gentle patter of rain on the window, the rhythm of your own breath rising and falling, quietly echoing the cycle that sustains us all. Before we part, I'd love to return to the same questions I asked at the beginning of this story, because the answers, like water, connect us. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? What time is it where you are? Are you curled up with a cup of tea, perhaps? Or just letting the sound of science carry you gently towards sleep? If this journey helped you relax, brought a little calm curiosity to your evening, or gave you something to ponder as you drift off, I'd be grateful if you left a like or subscribe to The Sleepy Scientist. It helps me keep making these slow, soothing adventures through time, space, and the natural world. And with that, may your dreams be cool, calm and clear like a quiet lake under starlight. Good night.